A very good evening to everyone. Thank you for joining on a Saturday. This is a Newsreel Asia special event, and it's a very important day for us. My name is Surabhi. Some of you may be knowing me. Um, I'm one of the founding members and a director at Newsreel Asia. May 3rd, as we all know, is observed as World Press Freedom Day. And in its latest report, Reporters Without Borders has said that the global press freedoms are at an all time low around the world. India has been ranked 151st out of 180 countries in the 2025 Global Press Freedom Index. And that is why we have gathered here today. In a post truth world marked by disinformation, rising authoritarianism, and shrinking space for dissent, we come together in solidarity with journalism, journalism that builds bridges and prevails against all odds. Today, apart from this, we are also celebrating a milestone of our own. We have completed 4 years at Newsreel Asia. So, before we move ahead with the conversation that we are planning to host, we'd like all of you to know a little bit more about Newsreel Asia. For that, I will invite Harshita Rathore. Harshita is a founding member and a director at Newsreel Asia. I would like her to share about who we are and what we offer to our audiences. Harshita, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Surbi. Good evening, everyone. Newsreel Asia is an online news magazine that is unique for two reasons. One, we tell stories through docuseries, long-form video features, news briefings, and commentaries. We believe that facts alone cannot change hearts and minds of people in the interest of human dignity and equity. So we bring news and issues to life through storytelling. And two, we believe that journalism must serve people and not politics. So we choose to feature issues that reflect the interest of ordinary citizens. We have an ongoing mega video series called Mapping India, which seeks to portray the lives of ordinary citizens in every state and union territory of India. The series covers issues under four categories: society, governance, democracy, and economy. From each state, we want to feature stories that reflect the most pressing concerns and offer a deeper understanding of the state. Apart from video series, we publish daily news briefings that cover current events. In a world overflowing with information, we cut through the noise to bring you one story every day, focusing on issues that truly matter. Our briefings take less than 5 minutes to read and help you become not just an informed citizen, but also an engaged and a responsible one. We are launching a campaign called We the People, V with double E, which stands for wise, empathetic, and engaged. We want our audience to be politically, socially, and economically wise in these times of deepening social and political divides and the decline of inclusive governance and accountability. We want them to respond to news with empathy. We also want to encourage active civic participation. This is why we are launching the We the People blog on our website. It will be a space where people can contribute feature articles, and share their perspectives. For more information, you can check out our website www.newsreel.asia. I would also like to acknowledge our Newsreel Asia team. We have Vishal and Sunil, Ganesh and Zam, Jyoti and Shafali, Surbhi, Maria, and we have Tej. That's all from my end. Thank you, and over to you, Surbhi.
Yeah, thank you so much, Harshita. Now, it's time for the conversation that we have all been looking forward to. Ishfaq is also here. Um, our one of our speakers, Greeshma, hasn't. She will be joining after 5:30. She has said, so we can start with Subhranshu and Ishfaq. Um, I think it won't be an exaggeration to say that the world today is deeply scarred by conflicts and violence. We are seeing it all around the world. And by conflict, we mean a serious disagreement or struggle between groups within a country, often including violence, political tension, or social unrest. Conflict can take many forms: civil war, armed rebellion, protests, or even systematic discrimination, and often disrupts peace, damages infrastructure, and affects people's lives. India also is witnessing multiple conflicts. The Kashmir conflict, as we all know, dates back to the time of partition. The Naxalite Maoist insurgency, which began in 1967, has claimed thousands of lives. The recent conflict in Manipur has exposed both deep ethnic fault lines and the troubling inability of the Indian state in maintaining peace and justice. We have with us three very important journalists today. Subhranshu, of course, Greeshma, who has not joined yet. She will be joining after 5:30, and Ishfaq Naseem, all of whom have used the power of truth telling in the face of conflict. I'll begin with Subhranshu, who is a former BBC journalist. He has reported on nearly all major conflicts in South Asia over a decade. For the last 20 years, he has led a unique experiment in democratic media in the Dandakaranya forests of central India, where he's been covering Maoist conflict. He's also the author of a book called Let's Call Him Vasu with Maoists in Chhattisgarh. I would request Subhranshu to, briefly describe the conflict situation first in the area that he has worked in, and also share the challenges that he has faced while reporting from the ground, including any personal anecdotes or reflections if he has. For the audiences, if you have any questions, please write them down and say in the Zoom chat that you have a question. We will have a Q&A at the end of the session. I will refer to the chat box to ask your questions, or just, if you're not there, just ask those questions to our speakers. And I would also request all of you to keep your mics turned off when others are speaking. If you are speaking, you can turn it on. So, yeah. Thank you, Subhranshu, and I would want you to take it forward from here.
Thank you, Surabhi, and happy World Press Freedom Day to all of us who are associated with press, media, journalism, and like democracy, everybody is part of democracy in the same way. We would like to say that press or media is not only with journalists, but with everyone. And so, freedom of press is freedom of democracy, freedom of everyone. Today, we are talking about mainly conflict area, and the subject you have given is reporting from the ground. And I will be talking mainly, as you said, about central India and this huge forest called Dandakaranya forest, which is spread in 6 Indian states and has been a theater for what we call Maoist conflict from now more than 50 years. As you very rightly said, it started, to give it a brief background, it started in 1967 in a place called Naxalbari in West Bengal. That's where it gets its name, Naxalism. These people, those who are Maoist, are also called Naxals. But if you look at the government of India's definition of the problem, they call it left-wing extremism. And I find it that is probably a better explanation. And if you look at left-wing extremism, then that story goes even further back. As we know, today we are in 2025. Both Communist Party and the right-wing party which rules us today, Bharatiya Janata Party, in different avatars, they both starts their journey in 1925. And that is also the start of left-wing extremism. So we have a long history. Many left-wing extremists were part of Indian freedom struggle. And as it happens in journalism, your terrorist is my freedom fighter. There are two sides, there is conflict, and we are in the middle. As it happens in central India, we are suspect of both sides. So Maoists think you are a state agent, and state thinks you are a Maoist agent, and people are confused in the middle. That's the character of every conflict in the world, wherever it is, and we will have to work in that atmosphere. Now, when I look around, what is happening in Myanmar. Of course, Kashmir, Ishfaq will be talking about. I look around what's happening in Sudan today, what's happening in, okay, Afghanistan is a bit quieter today, but there are, as you said, so many conflict areas. And in that comparison, Maoist conflict, though it has taken tens of thousands of lives, but when we look at the lives journalists have given in these 50 odd years, our number doesn't go more than half a dozen. And the latest, which is the most publicized death, very rightly, was of a reporter and a very good friend called Mukesh Chandrakar, who got killed not directly due to conflict, but that's what I want to talk more about. That we are all in conflict. Let it be a armed conflict, or Mukesh was killed by not Maoist or not state, but by his friend, another Chandrakar, while he was helping report in corruption. So journalism, we have more difficulty in conflict areas, but journalism in general is in conflict all the time because we are not standing on our own feet economically. We are looking for support from people who have resources. We have kept journalism in such a way, like we today's Press Freedom Day. Free has two meanings: free when you are out of shackles, and free when it doesn't cost anything. The journalism worldwide is in such a situation that it is taken for granted as a free commodity or very, very cheap commodity. So the cost of information, the cost of journalism is not at its right value. And the same thing permeates to people like Mukesh Chandrakar, who work from these conflict areas as stringers, not often as reporters. As we know, in most of India, and that may be the story in other countries also, most of the news gatherers are not treated as journalists. Most of the news gatherers are not treated as reporters. They collect information and also advertisement, which is the base of our journalism. And that puts journalists in such a bad situation, such a risky situation, because they don't have financial stability. They need to depend on this side or that side, always for running their homes, running their lives. So that is a bigger risk, even in conflict areas, as I was talking about. So I was talking about 6 people getting killed in Maoist conflict in central India. One was, when I used to work with a local newspaper now many years ago called Deshbandhu. Um, our friend and colleague Sai Reddy got killed by Maoists. And when I got a chance to meet the Maoists, I asked about Sai Reddy, and they justified his killing. They said, "You don't know what he used to do. He was a double agent, blah, blah." After that, one more journalist was killed, Mr. Jain, in the similar area, but later Maoist apologized, saying Mr. Jain was killed by mistake, but the Mr. Jain is gone. Your apology doesn't bring him back. Last two journalists were killed in crossfire. One was a DD correspondent, Doordarshan correspondent, when he went to report about election preparedness, and he came into crossfire between state forces and Maoist forces. One journalist was killed in very recently, last 2 years, due to an ID blast in Odisha, while he was taking photographs of a Maoist, um, some poster. So, Mukesh, when I spoke to him last, I was trying to help some people do journalism in the same area, in the Bijapur area. And Mukesh asked me, yes, you want to go to that village? You can go, but please don't go because Maoists have put IED in everywhere, and no story is bigger than your life. I disobeyed his advice. I am surviving, but he died. I went to that village because that story was important. We wanted to tell what happened in that village. We went there. So we are paratroopers. So we go to that village, take help of people like Mukesh Chandrakar, the local journalists, and we come back. But they live in that area every day. And it's like I remember Mukesh calling me just few months before that. He got a threat from Maoists who were not happy with one of his reporting, and he was asking advice, what should I be writing? He was a very brave man, and he wrote back without apologizing that, what kind of world you want to make. If a journalist who is telling truth to world cannot, in this situation. I don't know what Maoists replied to him, but he was brave. He fought the Maoists, but what he died of is a petty corruption of a road building. There was another person of the same name, Chandrakar, from the same village. Now, when there is conflict, economy of conflict is more dangerous than normal economics, which I was talking about. That you need to be dependent on money from people who have money. Like I was in Kashmir very recently, and I was very surprised to see some parts of Srinagar which has so many rich and posh looking houses. The same thing we see in conflict. I don't know the details about money of background of those rich people in Srinagar, but we see some people becoming very rich, like some contractors in conflict areas, because there is no scrutiny. Because it is conflict, nobody is going to check on you, nobody can inspect. So people get away with those corruption. And when some people like Mukesh would like to question that, now I think when you are in a situation of conflict, when you are seeing from both sides, people are settling scores by killing, which does not happen in normal situations. So that contractor decided to kill Mukesh, and we lost a very, very brave journalist um, just for reporting a normal corruption. I would like to end with um, yes, we have lots of problems when we are working in conflict areas, but we have more responsibility also. I will give you an example that when police kills someone, um, you know, we get information very easily. There are Maoists who will do the research for you. They'll give it to human rights activists, and human rights activists will feed you. What I have found that they will also keep people ready for you to be interviewed. You just need to go there, and people will be on the roadside to speak to you. In the same way, when Maoist kill state, and that is always there to report, because we will be going and reporting. But I'm talking about a third type of killing, when Maoists have killed locals, people, when calling them informer, and that number is very high, almost equal to people killed by Maoist or people killed by police. But I hardly see any reporting on that, because it's a tough work. Nobody is there to help. Neither party is going to help you. You will have to do your own research. You'll have to go to deep interior areas. So yes, working in conflict areas is very difficult. Working as a journalist is more and more difficult these days, because not only of financial situations, because nobody wants to hear anything against. So the democratic, that ethos is going down, as Surabhi just talked about. That RSF is saying this bad situation has never been, and it is only worsening. So democratic ethos is decreasing everywhere. But in conflict areas, we need to do more hard work as journalists. Of course, we'll have to save ourselves from both sides. We are suspected by both sides, but at the same time, uh, reports or information which is not coming easy to us, like I talked about, people killed by Maoists, one after another, and it comes to thousands. But I hardly see any reporting. These kind of difficult reports, research, we also need to do, however difficult that is. That is our part of work. We have chosen this work. And I again salute all of you on World Press Freedom Day. And I hope we will continue doing our work, and our situation will improve in the days to come. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Subhranshu. Thank you for the insights. And I would like to reiterate for the audiences that if you have any questions, please write them down in the chat box. After the speakers have spoken, we'll take your questions and get them answered. I think Greeshma has also joined us. Hello, Greeshma. Good evening, and thank you for
Hi,
joining.
hi. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, yeah. So it's your turn next to speak. I'll start by introducing you, and then you could, yeah. So Grishma is an independent journalist and a lawyer from Tamil Nadu. Her reporting has appeared in The Caravan, The News Minute, Scroll.in, Al Jazeera, and more. While her primary focus has been on the institutionalization of Hindutva and the RSS's regional influence, she has also covered Manipur extensively since the violence erupted there on May 3, 2023, exactly 2 years ago today. Uh, Thank you, Geetma, again. And I would like you to take us through the conflict in Manipur first. Share a little bit of, briefly about what the conflict is, and then your experiences while reporting there. Yeah. Thank you, Grishma, and over to you.
Thank you guys for having me. So it's been 2 years of the violence in Manipur. As of today, it's been 2 years, right? So as far as what the conflict is, I think there's a lot that's been said of, especially in the last year or so, since this is a conflict that is relatively new in the context of the Kuki-Meitei conflict, right? Which I actually always like to refer to as state government sort of created conflict. Like everybody refers to it as a Kuki-Meitei conflict, but I have right from the beginning, my perspective has been that this is a violence which was initiated by where the state government of Manipur had a big role in kind of initiating it. So I don't look at this as something that is Meitei Kuki. It's the state government of Manipur targeting the Kuki-Zo Hill districts and the Kuki-Zo people in specific. So that's how I look at it. Uh, but talking about what the violence or how the violence has been, like everybody knows, I think this is one instance of the many instances in India where reporting initially did not happen. When the violence started 2 years back on the 3rd of May, people were barely aware of what was happening in Manipur. And that's the very defining nature of this violence, that it took almost more than 2 months for this violence to come into the vision of Indians, so to say, and the government. I mean, it took a really horrible video to be circulated on social media, not even by journalists, on social media for people to actually, for the world to take notice. So that is how I would, kind of open my introduction to this violence, right? That the impunity and the lack of interest in Manipur is so high that it's always been difficult to report on it, because even if you're pitching, even if you're like trying to get commissions, even if you're trying to write about it, it's really really difficult. But going back, um, the violence when it started on the 3rd of May, India was very very occupied with the elections in Karnataka. So everybody was paying attention to it, including the government of India, including the BJP government at the center, where they were more worried about what's happening in Karnataka. The Home Minister visited Manipur close to in the end of May of 2023, and the Prime Minister is yet to visit. So that kind of shows how serious the government was about the violence. And like I already mentioned, it was after this video came. The video was where two cookies or women were being paraded naked after facing sexual assault. And that incident itself wasn't reported on properly. I mean, there was a journalist from the Cookies community who reported on it in the end of May, but it was not given the kind of importance that it should. And then there were a few other journalists who followed up, but it was only properly reported on, and like a proper FIR was registered and prosecution started only after that. So that itself kind of tells you how it is that the violence, what the response of the state to the violence was. But the root of this conflict kind of goes back to what it is that, how is it that Manipur treats its tribal population, right? There has been a um, lot of issues, lot of problems between the Meitei community, which is seen as the dominant community in Manipur, and the tribal community, which comprises of the Kuki-Zo tribes and the Naga tribes. So there have been many issues surrounding reservation as well in the past, where back in the 2000s, 2007, 8, and following even as early as recent as 2012, there have been issues around how it is that tribal reservation is looked at in Manipur. So that that is one. I wouldn't say like this violence and that has like the causation is like direct, because like I'm saying, this thing about reservation goes back in time, where ST groups in Manipur have been saying that the reservation that they deserve, that itself is reduced. So that has a long history. But in this case, in spite of the different protests that tribal groups have done in Manipur, saying that they are not getting the correct amount of reservation, the problem arose when there was this one order of the Manipur High Court, which kind of recommended that the state look into granting ST reservation for Meiteis, who already have SC reservation, OBC reservation, EWS reservation, and also the general quota is something that, the understanding of reservation itself is so flawed actually. Like, people who don't have reservation also have general category. So that itself is a category by itself. So when the court suggested that, the High Court of Manipur suggested that this is something, rather it recommended, there was again mobilization within the tribal groups saying that they oppose this. Both the Nagas and the Kuki-Zo people opposed it. But that is just one side of the picture. The other side is, before May of 2023, I would say from 2021, there were different efforts that were being made by groups such as the Arambai Tengol to create this narrative against Kuki-Zo people, targeting them, because simultaneously there is the war happening in Myanmar. So there have been instances like this is not the first war that's happened in Myanmar, right? There have been other coups that have happened in Myanmar, after which there have been situations where refugees have landed up at the borders of India, be it in Mizoram or in Manipur. So similarly, this time, as India was met with refugees coming, knocking on our doors, seeking help, initially, even the Manipur government was figuring out how to accommodate them, because before 2021 or 2022, I would say, there were actual efforts that were being taken by the state government to figure out what to do with them. Like there were civil society organizations also involved in this, along with people who are associated with the Manipur government. While Mizoram had was more accommodating, Manipur, people in Manipur were trying to accommodate the refugees. But around like maybe 1.5 years before the violence started in Manipur, there was a very anti-refugee language and a kind of language where refugees were being equated with Kukizo people. Like all Kukizo people were being there was a language that sort of was suggesting that if you are this, then you are illegal. So that sort of, I would say that kind of propaganda that actually not just came from groups like Arambai Tengol, but also like the chief minister himself has made certain statements that kind of suggest that indirectly, if not directly, and at times directly as well. There are videos that have been circulating in Manipuri, in Meiteilon, where he has suggested this directly, that a lot of people in the hills are illegal. So this kind of language led to a kind of sentiment where the majority community was made to kind of look at the Kukizo community as somebody who is a problem, or people who have to be kind of targeting is just, I feel like targeted is a very it's a soft word. Like there was propaganda driven, like right now, like today morning, like while I was going from the valley to the hills and hills to the valley attending protests, narco terrorist, illegal immigrant is used simultaneously with cookizo or cookie, right? So that's the kind of language that has become so common right now, especially post the violence, that it's troubling when you hear it. It's troubling when Indians are referred to with such phrases. But that kind of sentiment was kind of manufactured, I would say, over a year or so, where there were regular programs that groups like Arambai Tengol and other CSOs and other organizations were doing. And eventually, after this court order came, and there was also mobilization towards to claim for ST status by the Meiteis. So when this court order came and when Meitei groups started organizing programs demanding that this ST status be granted to them, there were also protests by the tribal groups, Naga and Kuki together, opposing this. And this was going back and forth. And eventually it led up to another protest on the 3rd of May, where there was this protest by the Kukizo and Naga tribes in all the 10 hill districts. But along with that, there was also like a counter blockade, counter protest that was done by Meitei groups such as Arambai Tengol. And that kind of set up for a confrontation, which happened actually just in one part of Churchandpur district. And when that kind of blew up and both the groups sort of indulged in arson and violence, uh, it spread like something that could have been controlled in that particular district itself. It instantly spread. And by that night, Imphal was under attack. Imphal was under attack in a way that people who were Kukizo were kind of targeted, attacked in Imphal. And on the 4th is when this video that we also saw happen. People are being lynched. An MLA who was also an advisor to the chief minister was brutally tortured and lynched. And many such incidents kept happening over the next week with no reporting. Not just the cookies, or even the Meitei Christians. More than 200 to 50 churches were burnt within the first week of the violence. Majority of them are Meitei Christian churches. And again, no reporting on it. So there was a certain kind of impunity that was kind of dished out by the chief minister and his people who supported him, which kind of gave people a free license to go out and do whatever they want. And that's what pretty much happened in May. But by the end of May, the Kukizo side also had started preparing themselves, because this was the Kukizo people against the state government. The state government was also using its own forces, because like in this video also, that where the women are being paraded naked, the police are present. In the FIR also, it was mentioned that not only in the FIR, the charge sheet also mentions how a police person was present when the incident happened. So the police were aware, but by then the forces had become, the Meitei police were supporting their own organizations such as the Arambai Tengol and the hill districts. I mean, even now, there's very little support that the state government gives to the hill districts, in the sense that hill districts are already like underdeveloped. But if you were to look at the facilities and the infrastructure that is available in the hill districts, it's really bad. And it's further even more bad right now because there are so many displaced people. Amongst the displaced, which is close to 60,000, 70,000. I mean, that's a figure, that's the figure of the state. But the number is higher. So the majority are Kukizo. So the Kukizo people are not being given the kind of support that the state government is supposed to give, and that doesn't mean the Meiteis are getting, a lot of support. Like today, one of the main demands or the main statement of this protest that was organized by Meitei organizations, displaced people from amongst the Meiteis, was that they're not getting any facilities. They're not even getting basic facilities in the relief camps like drinking water. They're not getting facilities like a clean place to live in. So the sum of this, what I'm trying to say is the violence was created by people who are associated with the chief minister, that is Biren Singh. I would say it was manufactured by him and the groups that surround him. And there was already discontent that was brewing against him. Multiple times there were people from within the BJP who had asked that he be removed, but didn't happen. A lot of people say that the violence was kind of orchestrated to keep him in power. But the larger question is why the central government did not intervene. Was it because like they didn't want to see a failure of their government, or was it because it's a habit of not taking responsibility when you screw up? I mean, that's clearly happening right now. The situation in India right now is exactly that as we speak. So a lot of things have been said about the has been is continues to be said about the violence, but nobody seems to be held accountable for it. The chief minister resigned after close to 1.5, like very recently he resigned, but it's not like he's been held accountable, though there are these audio tapes where he's heard saying that he bombed Kukizo districts. And that audio tape has been in the Supreme Court for a while. There seems to be no decision as yet. So accountability is missing. The people on both sides feel neglected, feel like there's nobody really to kind of hear their demands. Um, President's rule has come a little too late, is what people say. The only emphasis of this president's rule has been to create this impression that the government is trying to, is trying to make people who have weapons surrender it, but voluntarily asking people to surrender weapons when more than 6,000 weapons were looted from armories in the state capital. It's a little funny. So largely, I would say that if we were to kind of look at Manipur, it just feels like, in spite of the scale of the violence, in spite of the fact that inflation is so high in Manipur that basics are not available, in spite of the fact that people have been repeatedly asking for intervention, better forms of intervention, there is this illusion that it's okay, it's not as bad. That's the illusion that the government is trying to create, and that's absolutely false. That's the first part. The second part about difficulties in reporting, like I already mentioned, the interest on Manipur is very, very low. People are not interested in Manipur. And when I say people, I mean like journalistic organizations. There are very few journalistic organizations that in India or elsewhere who look at reporting Manipur as something that's important. So even to get editors to kind of get them interested has been difficult. Not only has it been difficult, people people that we report for in foreign agencies, because they don't understand it, I mean, foreign agencies are more interested in letting us report than Indian agencies. So these foreign agencies also kind of do not understand the gravity of it, and they just think that this is a small state in, northeastern India. So, just keep it like on the surface. I'm talking about these issues because the issues on the ground are plenty, and I feel like I don't really, I mean, I don't think I want to go into the issues that I face on the ground, because everybody in Manipur is facing issues. Like, I'm a journalist who still has the privilege of going in there, reporting there for a month, and then taking a week off, going back home. So the issues that I face there is something that I'm not really, I don't think I'm going to go into it, but it is pretty much the same issues that you would face anywhere where there's conflict happening. For me, the larger issue is, even though there are a few journalists who are, kind of dedicated to reporting Manipur, we don't find the kind of support that we should. It's like this burden that we have, where we have to consistently keep reporting, but we don't have the support. We don't have, like, Indian agencies, even progressive organizations, they themselves are under, a cash crunch, so to say. So how is it that they will also support us? And mainstream organizations, like you all know, they all have sold their souls, or whatever it is that they have to sell. So the propaganda, the biggest issue for me that I faced in Manipur is, all the mainstream organizations, the biggest organizations in India, have been dishing out, have been creating, have been supporting state propaganda. So by the time an independent journalist is able to report on what has happened and what she has seen, the propaganda is already out there. So that's the challenge. The challenge is that an Arnab Goswami will randomly start saying that the US and the China are together sending weapons to insurgent groups in Manipur, and that will pick up. No matter how absurd some of these things are, it will immediately create the attention that it has to create. And that also kind of makes people feel like, you know what, it's Manipur. People are just picking up guns and like shooting at each other. That's the kind of narrative that's already there in the rest of India, right? That, I mean, that is what everybody was saying when the violence started, that, insurgency has always been there. They were going at it by themselves. Big deal. That's the kind of statements that some of these journalists make, people like Arnab Goswami, people on Times Now, people on all these channels, is to it is to dismiss the reality that's in Manipur right now. It's to kind of make it seem like this is just a game of weapons, which it is not, which it absolutely isn't. Weapons have been there in Manipur forever. Insurgency has been there in Manipur forever. How is it that then suddenly, like, people from Imphal, like one entire community from Imphal, was wiped out of Imphal, and they've never been able to access it after? Like, this is the idea that one of the, like, out of the three largest communities in Manipur, Kukizo people are one of the largest communities, that this community cannot go to the capital of Manipur. I mean, the fact that people are still not registering this, people are still not able to understand what that means, is crazy. So I feel like there's been a failure of journalism, which is, I mean, journalism, like, there was, when I look at my own role in reporting this violence, me all the way from Tamil Nadu, somebody who's been predominantly reporting from the south, the fact that it's been close to 2 years since I've been in Manipur, and I'm not able to do reporting, very crucial reporting back in my own states, back in the south. That itself kind of shows that, reporters that we would expect to report on this, like all the bureaus sitting in Guwahati, in Calcutta, and Delhi, the fact that this wasn't considered important enough for consistent reporting, I think that is the larger problem. I think that is one of the issues that I would have with reporting, and not the issues that I personally face. So yeah, I think that sort of is my take on this.
Thank you, Grishma, so much for talking so extensively about it. And you spoke in a very heartfelt way. So thank you for that as well. Again, reminding audiences to put their questions in the chat box. Next, we have Ishfaq Naseem. Ishfaq is a senior correspondent, senior special correspondent for Outlook magazine in Srinagar. For years, he has been documenting everyday life under conflict in Kashmir, covering political upheavals, human rights violations, and stories of survival for publications including the Washington Post and the Telegraph. Thank you, Ishfaq, for being with us here today. I would also want you to take us, describe the contours of Kashmir conflict first, and then speak about your experience and the risks of reporting from ground in your state. So, yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Vishalji. It's a pleasure to be with all of you on this day. It's World Press Freedom Day, and it's indeed a message of congratulation should go out to all the people who are celebrating this day. But behind the celebration, we also have lots of like challenges. But to begin with, the conflict, I think. Uh, when you say that what the Kashmir issue is, I think it's not as what I say is as simple as the conflict in Manipur or the conflict elsewhere is. It's I heard the two speakers previously. It looked like that the conflict is more or less like the one which is uh, interracial or inter community conflict. There's an ethnic conflict which is there, or there is an urge for a more transfer of powers from the center to these areas. But here in Kashmir, as all of you know, I don't think it needs a larger explanation than this, that it's actually a direct war between the two countries. It's a war between India and Pakistan, and then it has been more or less similar since 1947. I was working with Indian Express newspaper in Pune, and then I went through the previous files as it came to me when I was like wanted to speak on the issue today. Now, I went through one of the files and I saw that you know the front page of the newspaper was like more or less like what it is now. Nothing has changed. You know that there is a firing across the border. There's a firing across the line of control. As far as the uh, Kashmir issue is concerned, it's there since 1947. There are different narratives. There are narratives from the militant groups. There are narratives from separatist groups. Then there is a narrative from the government of India. So it has been there since 1947. So if we talk historically about it, it has been there. There have been uh, some sort of political movement in Kashmir that the governments previously, after the armed militancy rose in Kashmir, after the guns were like in thousands here, like lots of people had these guns and lots of people were going out in the streets brandishing these guns. That was in the early 90s. The phase continued till 1995. And there were a lot of these political ideologies that cropped up, all the political, the political doctrines that cropped up while the central government or New Delhi was trying to tackle this problem here. There were concepts like self-rule, which kind of more of a shared sort of a sovereignty with Pakistan, which is also on the table, which sort of was endorsed by the central government. And then there were also greater autonomy, or the autonomy which meant that Kashmir had more powers when it comes to its dealings with the center. So all these issues have been there, all these political ideologies have been there, but all of you know that the Article 370 was revoked, and then it was revoked in a manner that there was no internet connectivity, there was no mobile connectivity in Kashmir. Everybody was like there was a lot of troop movement on the roads, and people lost contact with each other. And at that point of time, all those previous ideologies which were churned out by the different political parties earlier, like the National Conference or the PDP, which are the primary parties here, they became irrelevant. Article 370 is the point when those old ideologies became irrelevant. Then we had two flags in Jammu and Kashmir. One was the Indian flag, and another was the state had its own flag. Now it has been downgraded to the union territory, and there is an urge from political parties that it should be restored to the state. So there were two symbols of the state. One was that it had its own constitution, which was just very unique in a federal setup. Kashmir has its own constitution, which was annulled after the 370. Now that's a brief overview of the conflict. I think uh, right now what's happening is that the militant attacks had died down, but there has been a recent attack with the Pahalgam militant attack. But when it comes to reporting, it's as reporting is not difficult, or it's not something which you need more arsenal here, or you need more equipment, or you need more facilities here in terms of reporting. It's as good as it's elsewhere, in other states, in other places. But what's important is that when Shubhranshu said that one man's terrorist could be another man's freedom fighter. That's actually the red line which you have to maintain. It's very important that when you're reporting from an area like Kashmir, you just have to ensure that the coverage is balanced. You are not, you're not offending, you're not offending people. You need to understand that. And at the heart of this reporting, what's important is that you got to understand that people are important. You have to write about people's issues. That's very much vital. But also you have to understand that you have to take, you have to write both the sides. Even if you're writing an opinion, you just have to ensure that it's you have done a previous reporting on it. I was reading once a column by Thomas Friedman, who is an international uh, journalist of repute, who has written a very fabulous book of World is Flat, for which he came down to India, and he wrote that book. It was kind of that now the world has become more globalized in terms of there's more interconnectivity between the countries, and the world has really become flatter. So he said that if you have to write an opinion, you just have to write an opinion, but you cannot write an opinion until you have done a lot of reporting. I think when it comes to writing an opinion on Kashmir, I think actually the benchmark is that you're reporting. So as in every other situation, for example, if you're doing a beat reporting. For example, somebody is doing a BJP reporting, or somebody is doing a Congress reporting, then you know specifically that you're covering that beat, and there are no pulls and pressures, or there's no need to go for that extra layering of or to balance it out with other expectations that may be around. But in a situation where you're covering a wider story, which like that, you're covering a story which may have a ramification of bringing even the two countries at the verge of a war, then I think you need to be very sensitive, and sensitivity is something which is very important in these areas. And then, just to have to also care for your life. I know, for example, Shubhranshu spoke about some of his colleagues who have lost lives, or some of the colleagues who have who have crossed the red line, or something like. One of his colleagues was killed on an issue of corruption. I think those challenges always remain. Those challenges remain there in a conflict area, in any conflict area, be it bigger or smaller, or anything else. But like my previous two speakers spoke, that some of the journalists from Delhi go shooting down, staying cozily in their AC rooms or whatever, because shooting down their own narrative, and without actually knowing things on the ground, because there are wider complexities that are part of the story, which comes from any conflict zone. So you could have, for example, from Manipur, you could have wider, ramifications of the conflict, that there could be people who would be saying that there is an engagement from Chinese side, or there is an engagement from other countries into the meddling of the issues. But in Kashmir, while those things are like, they could be, they could be discounted, they could be dismissed, or what Greeshma said, that those issues can be dismissed. But in Kashmir, those internal, meddling is something which very very much vital, and that's actually what becomes part of the reportation. So for example, there could be from certain political groups, they would say that let's engage with Pakistan. The government of the center would say, no, we don't have to engage with Pakistan right at the time. So we know how we are going to deal with it. But Right now, after the Article 370 revocation, the conflict has become more localized, in a sort of a thing like, earlier used to be more street protests, but now there's more of an underground activity which has picked up here in terms of militant activity, which has picked up. There are a lot of youth who are joining militant ranks, and there's less information that's coming to the authorities from them. So that I think is I think the vital thing is that while we are celebrating Press Freedom Day, it's important that we remember some of the colleagues who have lost their lives, or who have upheld the principles of journalism without even caring for their lives. I think so. In a conflict area, it's a wide minefield where, if you lay your foot on a minefield, you're going to get killed. So I think what's important is that you have to have that kind of balancing. Is very important, that you just have to create every shade of opinion. That's very important. I think that is how I would describe it briefly. So if that is something which interests you, and if you think that I should speak more, then I can speak more, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Ishfaq.
Okay.
We'll take questions. I think many of us, people in the audiences, will have questions. So, and thank you all three of you, Shubhranshu, Greeshma, and Ishfaq, for the wonderful insights and the way you have spoken very passionately about your respective regions that you cover. Now we'll open the floor for questions. I can see one question in the chat box. It is from Maria. It is for you, Ishfaq.
Yes,
Maria,
okay.
Maria asks, how does
Yeah.
the current disruption in Kashmir affect the daily life of ordinary citizens? One is that's the first question. The second part is, are the reportings by mainstream media enough? And there's also a third part. So if you could take the first two first, and then we could come to the third.
So the first part is that how does it affect the daily lives? I think when it comes to ordinary Kashmiris, they know how to deal with these things because this is very common. When there's now a generation which has come from 90s who are still young, and who are in their 30s or something around that. So when in 1995, when the armed militancy rose, it was more frequent. The battles were more frequent. There were grenade attacks, and there were shootings all around. There was gunfire. So once you went out of your home, and you went to office, you would make sure that you had an identity card along. You carried an identity card because you never knew that you may get killed randomly. There could be a random firing. You may come under a fire from any quarter. No, nobody's fault. There could be a grenade attack, and then there could be a random shooting, and you will come under anybody's fire. So I think to that extent, it is still, there's still some reprieve. I don't think it's as bad as that it was earlier. Another part was what? Another part was,
The
so
second part of the
let me,
question.
I'll also write it down because I forget. And the part was what?
The
Sorry.
second part is, are the reportings by the mainstream media enough?
Okay. Is the reporting by the mainstream media enough? No, not really. Is the reporting by the mainstream media enough? No, not really. That has got to do with the things like prior to the revocation of Article 370, there was one law that nobody could own a property in Jammu and Kashmir. No person from outside could own, which meant now the Union Territory, earlier it was a state. Nobody from outside could invest here and own the property. So in terms of that, a lot of these media houses could not set up their large, sorry, could not set up their large offices here and set up their editions. So we don't have editions of the newspapers. I think like Indian Express doesn't have edition. I used to work with them in Pune. They had a large edition. There were a lot of people working there. So there are very few people. So in terms of coverage, it's very less. It's very less. Then whether it's a priority, no, it's very important. Kashmir is a very important area. It's not that they don't think it's a priority, but the concentration of media is not so huge. When it comes to the sorry, I'll just turn it off. When it comes to the national media, then when there are incidents like a Pahalgam one, then the interest in Kashmir grows. At that time, the foreign media is like the foreign newspapers. They don't have much staff here. They will come down. So at that time, but then at that point of time, also I don't think they are able to do justice. But what is important is that what you said, that whether mainstream media is able to do coverage. No, I don't think it is to that extent. To that extent, when it comes to the other incidents, I think there are local newspapers who cover the issues more frequently. I will also turn off my mobile phone because I'm receiving calls. So, was there another question? I think there
Yes.
was one.
Yes, there's another third question. So, Maria asks, what are your thoughts about the reporting about the recent violence being colored or being given the religious,
Which
uh,
meant,
Pahalgam
which
attack
means
she's
with,
talking about?
okay, Pahalgam attack. Uh, well, mm, I think, well, look, I think right at the time when we start, looking at the boom of the media, now we have a lot of these Facebook journalists, or so-called journalists, or Facebook bloggers. They have their own sort of opinion. They basically they don't depend on advertisements, or they don't become on kind of a regular sort of an income from the government. Although the newspapers which depend on the advertisements from the government do have a lot of their own issues. They're under pressure not to report beyond a point. But when it comes to these journalists, the so-called journalists from the Facebook and other media, I think they are like, they turn every issue is now being looked on through Hindu Muslim prism. I don't know if that is to grab attention, to grab the views, but that is like, when I started journalism, we were told that we should not write the name of the person. If there is a conflict, if there is a conflict, like if there is a Hindu Muslim clash, we should try and avoid name of the people. That was some kind of a, some kind of a learning we got from the journalism schools, that we should not write the name of the people. Now we don't write the name of the people. We actually say that he failed to recite kalma, then he was killed, he was shot at. Then we say that, the person failed to recite the holy verses of the Quran, or the person failed to recite the verses from the Hindu scriptures, then he was lynched and beaten, and that is it. I think to an extent, we are also responsible. The society has also become like that, that we see it that way. A lot of this toxicity has pervaded in our lives, and then I think that is. But everybody is free to write and voice his opinion. If people think that yes, this is a religious attack, then it is a religious attack. But there's no unanimity and no consensus on it. It was an attack which was based on a religious, your religious identity. Like for example, Gujarat was a religious attack. Gujarat, the Godra train attack, and the subsequent violence that was that incident generated. That was a religious. That everybody agrees that's a communal incident. But in this case, I don't think there is a consensus. There's a communal incident. That's something which which and the way leave people more strained. You leave people more strained. That's something which very 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 discouraging. You need to leave people more strained and more. You actually become part of a setup which sort of spills more of a venom than trying to find solutions. That's, I think, how I would like to put it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ishfaq. There's another question from Aryan Singh Thapa, and that's open for everyone to answer. I mean, all three, the three speakers. So he's asking, how can journalism better serve marginalized communities in conflict zones? So, Shubhranshu, if you would like to take it first, and then Greeshma and Ishfaq.
Yes, thank you, Surabhi. which I was talking about in my talk also. I'll give you some figure. This is figure from the government of last 25 years. Naxalites killed 1179. Um, Policemen killed 1285. We see a lot of reporting of them, but what he's asking that marginalized communities, and the figure which I want to mention now is Naxaliyon द्वारा मारे गए ग्रामीण. The people killed by Naxals is 172. So much higher than policemen killed and Naxal killed. Whereas what we see reporting
Anshu,
may.
I'd like to stop you. When you were mentioning the figure, suddenly your voice just broke. So if you could repeat that.
So the figure is from the government and from last 25 years, 2001 till now. Um, Naxal killed 1179, police killed 1285, and people killed by Maoists by calling them informers 1721. What I was trying to say is we see a lot of reporting about police killed and Maoist killed, but there are people which Aryan is asking. There are communities in the middle who are suffering. We see some reporting, but I don't think anybody knows that way far more people have been killed in between, and we see very little reporting about it. Um, which can be done, but what I find, say, I will talk more about the central India only. The community there is a tribal community, indigenous community, and they speak indigenous languages. This is very recently it's happening now. It's happening more in, say, like Kashmir. When I used to go to Kashmir in early 90s, there were very little local journalism reporting for mainstream media. Similarly, we hardly find any reporter in central India speaking those languages. I don't speak that language. I always need a translator, and that is hard to come by. So if we need to report more about people, their problems, means number one, this paratrooping, which has reduced, but we need to know the language. So what I was trying to say is, Aryan, if we want to report more on the community, we will have to know the language of the community. That's number one. We need to travel far to meet, which is not possible all the time, but whenever that is possible. These are difficult things to do in conflict areas, but that's what is our work, that we need to travel far off areas where the conflict is happening, like in Chhattisgarh. The conflict is happening in the forest, and we live in the roadside. So lots of reporting we see from the roadside, but going deep in the forest, then you'll have to know the language, the terrain, which is our work, which is very difficult, but we should do more of that. How do we do that? Like Grishma was saying, there's not much support available. So support is reducing day by day. So how to do that? Those are the things we should be thinking more. Can we use more technology? Now more and more people have access to mobile phone. Can we have one informer, reporter, whatever we call it, from all of these villages who we can be connected with? So can we use more new technology to report more on the marginalized communities is what we should be exploring.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Subhranshu. Next, I would want everyone's to ask their questions themselves. So you also have a chance to speak. So, Harshita, your question is for Grishma. If you could yourself ask that question.
I just wanted to ask, in Grishma's understanding, if she has some solution that can be there to resolve the current conflict in Manipur. Any steps from the government and from the communities that can mile down this conflict that is happening.
Uh, Actually, I don't think as a reporter and somebody who's not from there, I'm an outsider to Manipur. It's my place to like think of a solution. I can just report on what I see and what it is that both the communities are saying in terms of how, I mean, what they are demanding is kind of against each other, right? What the Kuki community is demanding and what the Meitei community is saying is sort of contradictory. But why is it that this community, that is the Kukizo community, is making this demand, and what is the historical reasons that the tribals of Manipur, be it the Nakukizo or the Naga, feel like they have been discriminated against? There is a history to that. So in that context, I can report on it. But how is it? Because already, like, the Nagas have their own separate talks going on with the Indian government. So as far as I'm concerned, the issues that affect everyday life, right? For instance, that this community is not able to access schools that it previously used to, hospitals that it previously used to, the airport, without which they have to now travel for more than 20 hours during rains, 48 hours. They do not have like transport because of the unavailability of uh, reasonable transport options. People are dying that because there are so many displaced people in a particular district, a sub district called Saikul and Kangpopi, and because it's difficult for them to travel to the next district or to the next state to even get something as simple as an ultrasound, women are opting out of getting ultrasounds and then endangering their own lives. You know, there are such issues that are that are like, a lot of people say that, okay, this seems like an issue which has this thing of bad infrastructure in the northeast, but even if all of the northeast has bad infrastructure, the conflict has made it worse, right? So those are things that when you are on the field, when you speak to people, you hear, and if the central government or the state government, but the state government is against the Kukizo people, which is what the people have been saying, which is why president's rule had to come. So now, what is the central government doing to solve these issues for them, or at least to address them? um, these are the kind of things that we can report on. Like, like, as a long-term solution, it's something that is, uh, any kind of solution is something that the government has to figure out while hearing the people fairly. That's one thing that, the people have been saying over and over again, that there needs to be a fair hearing of people, and that fairness needs to come through when you listen to our demands. And I don't know how it is that it would come to that, because of what I can understand, the government is trying to wear them out, and that just means, because there was a conflict before this, that before the Kukizo and the present conflict, there was a Naga Kuki conflict where the violence was also intense. Of course, that was a different time. The reportage was far lesser. The emphasis on what has happened there was far lesser. And eventually, it just kind of fizzled out, where more than 350, 400 villages were lost. People could never go back to their villages. So, and I would say that that issue was never sorted out, right? So that is something that the government is hoping to do, hoping to go back into history and look the other way, which is what that government did. That time it was a different government. So I feel like if there was more reporting, more emphasis on the situation of people, maybe at least, the government would be forced to at least like act on it a little bit. But when that emphasis is not there because there's not enough reporting, then how do you even think of, why will the government take the pressure? Which is why president's rule came so late, right? So yeah, I mean, I feel like solution, I don't know. Like, our community feels like it's been historically like marginalized. How do you address that? Where there are many such communities in India who feel that way, but here there has been violence. I don't know.
Yeah, thank you, Greeshma. The next question is from Jyoti, and Jyoti, would you like to ask that yourself?
Yes, the next question is, even though Grishma has talked a bit about this, I mean, once mainstream journalists like Arnab Goswami, they have set up a narrative, then the substance of the work of or other independent journalists sort of reduces a bit. So my question is how, I mean, what are the short or long-term implications of media polarizations for democracy and press freedom? I mean, any of the speakers would like to take up.
Democracy more than press freedom. Like, for instance, like, the situation in Manipur is that violence has been happening since the 3rd of May. And by the end of May, there was full-blown violence, where both the sides had taken positions and they were going at each other, right? And weapons in Manipur aren't new. Weapons have been there from the time that insurgency started, which is within within years of independence. So when Arnab Goswami, after more than a year, goes on television and says that there is this gun in Manipur, or they're using drones to drop bombs, and creates a narrative where people feel like, oh my God, there are weapons in Manipur. Like, it kind of, there has been reporting about how there's this golden triangle and how access to weapons is very easy. So again, you're trying to sort of turn the issue towards something that is not as important. Access to weapons, all the groups have. It's not like how it is that they have that access and what do you do about that is for the government, for the agencies to figure out. But when you make the emphasis of this whole conflict weapons or drugs or whatever it is, while actually people are being killed, people have faced violence that they're saying that we want accountability for, justice for, then the polarization is not just that there is this impression given of a conflict, that this is like the wild, wild west sort of a thing. But it also, what ends up happening is it takes away the accountability of the government. The larger emphasis here has to be, what has the government been doing? How is it that in the capital, there were so many people who were lynched? Where were the bureaucrats? Where were the police officers? Why has there been no questioning of bureaucrats? Why has there been no accountability on all these officers? All of these questions evade because everybody is like, okay, Manipur, it's like bombs are dropping from drones. So let us think about that. So, I'm saying this as somebody who's not there. When I'm outside, this is what people want to talk about, So they don't want to address or think about the critical questions. So when that happens and when it is being put on broadcast on TV, how is it that small journalists like me, independent journalists like me, who already written about weapons, like I've been reporting on the kind of violence and what weapons were used, like from the time that the violence started in Manipur, right? I did a whole story in September of 2023, 1 year before Arnab and a lot of journalists went on this tirade, that openly people were moving with weapons in Imphal, when there is a particular part of Manipur that was being burned. So all the work that we do, again, outlets which are not as mainstream, it's kind of undone, right? And it's like a giant that we're going up against. So I don't know what it is that can be done. I don't know. It's something that we are all trying to solve. We talk about it, others report about it. We try as much as possible to consistently report on certain aspects by not being reactionary to what these people say, because there's no point, there's no thing in doing journalism that's reactionary. So we just keep at it, and I guess they'll keep saying what they say.
Yeah, thank you, Greeshma. Next, we have a question from because we are a little short of time, so I'll take just two questions. The next question is from Ganesh, and he says that any of the speakers can take this question. Ganesh, would you like to ask the question yourself?
Yeah, just want to ask that most of the conflicts that we're talking about right now, they're all political conflicts. So can reporting be done on a kind of conflict zone by being apolitical?
If any of you would like to take that, Greeshma, Shubhranshu, and Ishfaq.
Yeah, I think that is the reporting from a conflict zone. One has to be always apolitical. That's actually how the reporting has to be done. Because if you're apolitical, then you're going to bring the color in the story. I think it's very important that we have to be apolitical. We have to look as outsiders, or even if you may be an insider, you may be there in living there at the place, but you have to be always an outsider. You just have to be always as unbiased and as impartial as it is possible. That's true for any kind of reporting. And like for example, if you're doing normal beat reporting, then you may be tipped off by sources, and then you may write a story. The source is saying this and that, and the larger story that may be in mind that you're trying to expose some sort of a corruption or malfeasance in a certain position or in a certain department or in a certain government office. But when it comes to conflict, I think that that is not the interest you have in mind. You are not directing your story towards an end. You don't want that story to create an effect. You just are writing the story. That's it. And that story can be written only when you are apolitical. I think that's important in a conflict zone. I think so.
Yeah, thanks, Ishfaq. Do any of the other speakers want to take this question?
I would sort of say that I don't know whether apolitical is the term that I would like to use, but I feel like there is, in any kind of conflict, I feel like what we largely miss is accountability and where that accountability should come from, right? Especially when different communities are involved. So for you to have a fair sense of what is happening and where it is that accountability should come from, what is the history, what is the context, I feel like beyond being apolitical, political, whatever it is, you need to be informed. I feel like that's one of the things that's largely missing. There is context to everything. There is historical context to everything. There's also I mean, India is a country where we are yet to even, we are yet to call a lot of conflicts conflict. That's the kind of, I mean, like, if you were to ask me, the longest running conflict in India is caste. We don't even call it conflict. So I feel like the emphasis largely has to be that as journalists, we need to be very, very aware of what is happening. I feel like at times when there is reporting that just comes out of, this neutral kind of journalism where you speak to one person from this side, one person from that side, and somehow don't ask any questions to the state, then what does that mean? So I feel like in my context, at least, not just in Manipur, but also like elsewhere, I have always tried to kind of understand things not just from that year or the year before, but at least a decade or more than a decade. So I feel like that sort of work, which I think is a basic, right? It's not even like something that is out of the world. That sort of basic work is not going into journalism these days. So being informed and being very aware of everything that's happening, at least as much as possible, I think is important. So being politically aware.
Thank you, Greeshma. Next question is from Jyoti.
So my question is also open to everyone. We see that in any conflict zone, there are so many rhetorics floating around, and it's a very politically charged environment. So you will often find people making exaggerated claims also. And we as journalists have a responsibility to verify those. So, but sometimes it can be tricky to, verify some claims. So I would like to ask you, all of you, that have there been times when you as a when you as a journalist have struggled verifying such claims in like a very politically charged environment or in a conflict zone?
So yes, when in a conflict, there is a rumor which always is running around, and you just have to be very specific. So the way to get over is to always get an official line. Always get, for example, if there are killings, how would you verify that? You just have to speak to people in the government offices to give out information on the number of people who have been killed. That's very important. And yes, there are rumors, and then sometimes you end up doing stories on the rumors itself to spread more rumors. But kind of the way the fact checking is always done these days, I think if you are doing a fact checking from a conflict zone, I think you have to be very, very, very cautious when you're doing fact checking, because as I said previously, that you're walking on a minefield. If your foot lands at an inappropriate place, you may get killed. So you must be alive to write a story. So and the fact is that you are writing different opinions. You're writing one opinion. You're clubbing all the opinions together to write a story. So in that situation, for example, if you want to fact check, how do you fact check? How do you fact check? That's in a conflict situation, it's very difficult to fact check unless it's, for example, the number of people killed, or for example, the other things, if there's a sensational claim put out by any of the groups that, now this happened and that happened, that often gets confirmed from by going to the ground, or maybe speaking to other people as well, you're not able to reach out. So, but then, certain areas are like very difficult to explore in a conflict zone, like fact checking. Fact checking, if you're doing political fact checking, I don't know how you're going to do that. Because, we live in a post-truth world, we live in a world where, for example, an incident can be given a color, and then the color, you go down and go back to the history, then that incident gets colored and it takes a very different turn. So even a half truth becomes a lie at times. So it's very difficult from an area where there are different stakeholders to confirm or then to disapprove those claims. I think it's very difficult. But it's important that despite this challenge, we stick to the facts. The facts is what makes your story. I think that's very important. Ultimately the facts come out, by through your ground reporting, and maybe reaching out to the people who are part of this process.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Ishfaq. And Sonu Kumar had raised his hand. So, Sonu, if you have a question.
हमारी आवाज जा रही है?
जी जी।
पहले तो सुरभि मैम और जो भी हैं यहाँ मौजूद आयोजकों को मेरा धन्यवाद है कि आपने फिर प्रेस फ्रीडम डे पर इतना महत्वपूर्ण सेंसिटिव विषय पर आपने कार्यक्रम को आयोजित किया, और इसके माध्यम से मैं भी बहुत कुछ जान पाया जो मुझे जानकारी नहीं थी। शुभ्रांशु सर को तो कई बार मैंने सुना भी है, और शायद यूट्यूब के इस माध्यम से ही सही, मगर मैंने सुना है। और मुझे खुशी हुआ कि ये कार्यक्रम में जुड़ने के बाद जो जानकारी मिला, मैं बिहार से हूँ और हमारी ग्राउंड रिपोर्टिंग भी खुद की रही है। मैं न्यूज़ 24 के साथ काफी टाइम तक यहाँ समय दिया, मतलब पढ़ाई करते हुए। तो मैंने कई चीजों को देखा है। चुनौतियां तो हैं पत्रकारिता में, लेकिन आज मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगा और बहुत सारी बातों की जानकारी मिल पाई। मैं चाहता हूं कि इसी तरह के आगे भी इस तरह का कार्यक्रम हो, तो आप मुझे अवश्य अपने साथ जोड़े। मुझे लगा कि मैं 2 शब्द अपना रख पाऊं, इसीलिए मैंने अपना हैंड रेज किया था। सवाल नहीं थे, कई सवाल मेरे मिलते जुलते थे जिनके जवाब मुझे मिले। बहुत बहुत आभार आप लोगों का। धन्यवाद।
ठीक है। Thank you, Sonu. Thank you so much. And we have crossed the time duration. So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you so much to all the 3 speakers for taking out time to be here with us today. Thank you very much. And before I leave, I have an important announcement to make for everyone else, all the journalist friends who are here. As we've heard from the 3 remarkable speakers about their experiences of reporting from conflict zones, we would also love to hear from all of you. If you are journalists and if you are reporting stories from the ground, it could be a unique moment in your reporting. It could be a personal challenge that you have faced, or an insight that reveals the everyday realities of journalism in India. And we believe that such stories matter. So we will be sharing more information on our social media as well. We would invite you to share them with us. You can write to us. I'll share the email address. Selected stories will be published at Newsreel Asia, on Newsreel Asia website, and also be featured in our newsletter. It is our small way of trying to celebrate the spirit of field reporting and amplify voices from the ground. So we would be looking forward to your stories and experiences. And finally, yeah, thank you everyone for joining, and I hope you all have a good weekend. And we say happy Press Freedom Day to ourselves. Greeshma just joined. So yeah, Greeshma, I was just saying, bidding goodbye to everyone. Yeah, that's it. Hope you're there. Thank you for joining everyone. Bye.